Is Rob Jones from Big Solar CoOp, which is not-for-profit volunteer-led organisation, and they install and own panels on commercial and community buildings. And there'll be opportunity for questions and answers after each of the speakers have spoken. And then we have two members of our local planning department who are hopefully going to be able to answer your questions on the regulations and how they apply generally, but obviously not specifically to your home. We have Kate Russell, who's Conservation Officer, and Griff Bunce, who's a Planning Officer. And finally, many thanks to Matthew Fuller from local company West Country Electrics, who installs solar in our area and based locally. And thank you very much for coming along and agreeing to answer any technical questions regarding solar installation. So thank you very much.
I'm volunteering for the Big Solar CoOp, and we're doing the same stuff as Richard is doing, except we're doing it for companies and for community buildings. So that's the distinction. We're doing our services at companies and community buildings. Some of you may know Maria Ardley. She's actually the coordinator in Stroud for Big Solar. She was hoping to be here tonight, but couldn't be as she had a family commitment, so you get me the volunteer instead, but she's a fully employed member of Big Solar. And I had corresponded with Richard when I heard about his scheme. I read about it in the Sunday Times, I think.
Yes.
And got a lot of accolades there, rightly so. And since I'm involved in the sheepskin can, as it were, I signed up 30 villagers who drafted onto the scheme that Richard is running. So it's a really brilliant scheme. I recommend it. Okay, here we go. Community solar everywhere. So Big Solar is a not-for-profit co-op organisation. We're attempting to put solar on the roofs of companies and community buildings across the UK. And we're carbon first, ethical and professional. I might explain a little bit about that later on. Here you've got a map, not of Stroud, but of Birmingham. The reason for using Birmingham is because Birmingham has been solar mapped. So there's some very clever software which estimates the potential for solar production just from a map, Google Maps, and calculates what the potential is for certain areas. So, as we know, there's lots of rooftop around, and lots of energy being consumed within those buildings. And the solar map looks like that for Birmingham. And you can see some very big numbers there, but perhaps the one to focus on is the fact that's the solar potential in Birmingham. If all viable rooftops were used, it would provide 37% of Birmingham's energy requirements. Pretty impressive. So the question is, why isn't there a lot of solar out there already? I think about 10% of households in the UK have solar themselves, and it's a much lower proportion. I don't know what it is. It's probably 1 or 2%, perhaps for companies. Several reasons. One, there's a very large capital outlay, which is talking about sort of £7,000 upwards. You're talking about 20,000 or more for some of the businesses that we are considering their offer. And businesses at the moment, over the last 3 years, for obvious reasons, have been focused on short-term survival rather than thinking about their carbon footprints and about the future. So it's been quite a difficult time to get the message across, but certainly the need is there. And it's complicated, as Richard has demonstrated, and for a commercial installation, it gets even more complicated. And as a result of that, who do you trust? There are a lot of really good installers out there. I'm sure Matt is one of them. But I believe there are a few cowboys out there as well. So who do you trust in this complicated and expensive world? And these are our responses. Well, first of all, Big Solar provides the capital. So there's no capital outlay for the business itself. Big Solar provides the capital, takes out a lease on the roof space, of the host companies concerned, and they sign up to a power purchase agreement. So Big Solar charges the company a tariff, but there's no capital outlay for the company concerned. So it's really quite compelling. We take all the risks and reduce the energy costs as a result. So it should improve the performance of each business we're talking about here. It's complicated. We've got 150 volunteers involved, including myself. About a third of them are trained in doing solar design. And the company's involved in purchasing all the equipment, arranging for the installation, grid permits, insurance, monitoring, maintenance, and so on. All of that is taken care of by Big Solar. And in terms of trust, well, we're a non-profit organisation focused on reducing carbon in the atmosphere, and I guess we have to make our case to you tonight about whether you can trust us. As far as sites that are viable today, we're talking probably at the lower end a tennis court size roof, probably about 50 kilowatt peak in terms of size, which Richard, you said your installation was 4, so about 10 times the size of Richard's installation, and probably consuming about half of the production within the building itself, so quite a large user of electricity and with a large roof. And that probably means the companies concerned are spending around £20,000 a year on electricity. And we'd also want to be dealing with viable organisations. We don't want companies that are at the risk of falling over imminently. The contracts that we are involved in are 30-year contracts, so very long term. And that really matches the fact that solar panels have that sort of life these days. Warranties, I think, of 25 years are common, and they're even going out to 40 years at the moment. So, and the contract matches that. First 3 projects. Firstly in Ludlow, Shropshire, 120 kilowatt peak, so quite a decent size, a couple of tennis courts there. And it's a farm machinery manufacturer, so it's using a lot of energy. Second one is a company called Kerry Ingredients also in Shropshire, a bigger installation, 300 kilowatt peaks. And that's a multi-roof installation, and it's a food processing plant. Again, a very heavy user of electricity. And finally, something completely different, something Richard can relate to. It's a doctor's practice in Birmingham, just 30 kilowatt peak, so it's quite a small installation, smaller than most of the ones we'll probably contemplate. But it's been combined with a charging facility for the staff of the doctor's surgery concerned.
Charging from their cars?
Yes, charging their cars. So those are the first 3 projects. They're about to start, installations start next month. In terms of what you get as a solar host, you get, as I said, solar at 0 capital cost. You get immediate electricity and carbon savings, and you get a hedge against the future, because the tariffs that we charge will only increase alongside RPI, inflation, and won't go up as electricity markets gyrate as they have done in recent years. And that diagram is meant to show the relevant cost there. So we've used the government's expectation forecast for electricity prices against what we are expecting to be charging those businesses. Gives you greater energy independence, and also a beacon, as we say, for future sites, hoping to set an example for other organisations around them. The legal agreements, the lease and the power purchase agreement, we try and make them as straightforward as possible. From what I've heard, lease agreements for roof space in the past have run up to 50 or 60 pages. Ours is 12 pages long, so more than we really want, but it's quite concise, plain English and straightforward. There's no penalty for roof repairs. Within the contract, 2 repairs are allowed within the 30-year contract period. And Big Solar will pay for the removal of the panels if that's necessary and reinstallation on 2 occasions over that 30-year period. No minimum energy clause, which apparently are a feature of some other companies that are doing this. And if the company decides after year 5 that it would like to buy out and reduce its energy costs further, it can pay for the depreciated cost of the panels at that point, and then it has total ownership of the panels itself. So trying to be pretty flexible on the legal front. The co-op model itself, and there are lots of co-ops around, lots of energy co-ops around. Most of them are focused on sort of single installations or regions, small regions. But the company that I'm talking about here has a national ambition, so we're installing solar across the country. As I said, volunteer members, 150 of them, and a small head office force, around about half a dozen people, just. But most of the effort comes from the volunteers. £840,000 has been raised so far, and the investors will receive just a 4% return maximum. That's not promised, it's the target at this stage, so a modest return for their initial investment. And the approach is also ethical. Somebody asked about where the panels come from, and yes, all roads lead to China as far as solar panels are concerned. But we only deal with one company. It's a German-Swiss company that does most of the construction of the panels in Norway. So that's mostly hydropower and building the stuff. So that's important to the company. So we have vetted or are vetting all the supply chains involved in these solar installations. We're also vetting the installers. There's only one installer based in Basingstoke, actually. That's another co-op that we're using at this stage. We're interested in working with others, but there's just one at this stage that is doing the first 3 installations. And if we make any surpluses, they get invested back into doing more solar projects. This is where we stand in terms of progress so far. So 550 sites around the country have been assessed. 300 of them have solar array designs done and delivered to the host. As I said, there are 42 volunteers that have been trained in doing solar array design, and another 100 or so that are helping out as well. There are 5 training sessions. You can actually go onto the Big Solar website and look at the training sessions yourself and learn a bit more about the offering and what's involved in solar design. There are 3 local nodes, one of which is Stroud, because there's a concentration of potential clients in this area. And so those first installations around, not at Stroud, but the first installations I spoke of at the beginning, they start next month. There are a couple of case studies here of installations that haven't yet started, but I've got a bit more information on these. The first 3 that's public information, but these are just the case study details. So this one here, 190 kilowatt peak, so it's quite a large installation. That would produce 175 megawatt hours per annum of electricity, and 37% of that production would be used by the host company. They currently have a tariff of 49.5p per kilowatt hour, and our offer for them is 18.3. And just to blow out that graph a little bit, I don't know whether you can probably see that. That graph just compares the generation of the panels, the yellow bars you can see there, and behind it you can see the energy usage of the business concerned. So these panels actually will produce 110% of its energy needs. Unfortunately, that generation doesn't happen at the time you always need it. So it means that they have 37% self-consumption and 63% goes to the grid. And that illustrates what happens to the tariff. So if you use the government forecast for energy prices, you see that upper line going up into the stratosphere, and the more stable line, which is just been increasing at the rate of inflation under a big solar contract. Second one is 105 kilowatts, producing 88 megawatts a year. Here the self-consumption is 62%, so that's more appealing. But they're currently on actually a tariff of 25p. Presumably that's about to run out and will be significantly more in the not too distant future. But our offer to them is 15p kilowatt hour. There's the same graph. And same again as far as the tariff is concerned. As far as Stroud is concerned, our aim is to have 400 kilowatts peak of panels in place by the middle of this year. In fact, why not go to the next slide, because that shows what the progress against those goals. So we've got 32 sites assessed in the Stroud District at present. 7 proposals have been sent to the companies concerned, and yesterday we signed our first exclusivity agreement with one of those companies. So that's a result, a big plus for us. We work with Transition Stroud and other organisations. We meet with them every quarter. We're looking to build up our volunteer base. Currently there are 3, of which I'm one. If you'd like to join us, you'd be very welcome. And we're working with a lot of the existing networks and organisations around around Stroud District to make it happen as fast as possible. And we're trying to spread the word. That's why I'm here this evening doing this presentation. We issue press releases, and word of mouth is getting about as well. And at the moment, my first focus has actually been in Stonehouse, where there's a quite a big concentration of industrial units, large industrial units there, and we're trying to make it happen in Stonehouse. So the final slide, how can you help? Well, if you or you know someone who has a big commercial rooftop that might be interested in this offer, we'd like to know about it. Probably best if you contact Maria rather than myself in the first instance. We also need more volunteers, as I've said, and if you're interested in investing in it, then the share offer may reopen at some point next year. The current share offer closed in December last year. But I think that's it. I'm happy to take your questions.
Great, thank you very much. So, any questions? Yes.
Just out of interest, who gets the feed-in tariff from these agreements?
Big Solar does.
Yeah.
Which is negotiated with individual power companies in the relevant site. Yeah.
You mentioned about the quality of suppliers and installers. Is there any regulatory oversight of quality for installation? Presumably, if the equipment's to a certain standard.
Yes. Richard may know more about that. And Matt, do you?
Yeah, sorry. It's one of the most tedious, complicated, bureaucratic processes you have to go through in order to be allowed to connect to the grid. So there is the whole process. So the micro generation certification scheme, which is a huge amount of paperwork, and the renewable energy consumer code, which I actually find the questions that they asked us are actually quite sound in terms of checking you out. So you're not allowed to connect to the grid unless you're a member of both of those organisations. And yeah, we're assessed to death, and the work's incredible. So.
Right, lady in the stroke up and there.
See at the top, community, not just businesses, but communities, buildings. Would that include churches?
Yes, it would. Yeah, the question was whether community buildings would include churches, and yes, it does. But I understand that the decision-making process can be quite lengthy. We have the same issues with schools. Apparently schools have to get Secretary of State approval to go ahead with a solar installation. So the decision-making chain is longer than some commercial organisations, but yes, it can be done.
Hi. I wonder what sort of time commitment and possibly knowledge level you would need as the interface to someone who owned a building that actually had someone in that building. So if they're actually running the lease. And
So as a volunteer?
no. If you were to take up the scheme, would you expect somebody to be giving sort of quite a bit of time to be liaising to get it set up?
Yeah. The question was whether it would involve quite a lot of time of the company concerned. Probably not. Hardly any expense. Possibly the only expense would be if the company wanted to have a lawyer to look at the lease agreement. But no, the Big Solar is hoping to take most of the risk and most of the effort on its shoulders, and the involvement of the company itself is, I think we're trying to keep that to a minimum. I can't really put a figure on it, but that's the intent.
Yeah, but we've got those stipulations.
And I've got a question for you. What about batteries?
Batteries.
Yeah.
No, Richard's passionate about batteries. Big Solar doesn't do batteries at this stage. I think where companies want to install a battery alongside, we'll endeavour to make it battery ready. But batteries are quite carbon, there's a lot of embedded carbon in batteries, and we wanted to focus our efforts on solar panels which have a greater focus on reducing carbon. And actually the financials, although for individuals, so I have one myself, are pretty good. They're not as compelling, I understand, from a business standpoint. But the short answer is no, we don't offer batteries at this stage. It's a possibility for the future.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay.
Hello, good evening. We don't have a presentation. We are sort of here just to answer questions you may have. But please bear in mind we can only give you answers on the generalities. We may not know your specific house or where it is or which direction your roof slope may face. I was very glad to hear that somebody thought there was a process more technical and bureaucratic than planning. So I'm pleased that we may not necessarily be the brunt of it. So yes, we're here to answer any questions that you have. If you are wanting to crack on with you, we can stay around afterwards as well, if necessary. Okay, lady in the blue jacket. Sorry, man in the blue jacket there.
I've got a quote for installation. I'm told I need planning permission for more than 10.
Did you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was whether there was a need for planning permission for more than 10 panels. Not that I know of. I might just consult my computer.
Does it matter if it's roof mounted?
Yeah, so the way the permitted, without boring you about planning, but where you are undertaking small-scale works, it will be permitted development. Where it's permitted development, it means you don't need a planning application. Now, to make it nice and simple, the permitted development order is broken down into a number of different factors. So if you're putting solar panels on the roof of your house, you'll be looking at a different section of the regulations than if you were putting a standalone array up in your garden. So I'm going to just pass this to Kate for a moment.
Yeah, no, I can't see that there is a limit on the number of panels.
It would depend whether it's on your roof. Yeah, it will depend on whether it's on your roof or on your land. There are some general rules. On your roof it can't go higher than your roof. It can't project more than 20 centimetres from the plane of your roof. On land, as a standalone array, yes, it will be different. I would have to look that up for you. But again, these are sort of questions that I'm prepared for, but don't necessarily know off the top of my head.
planning department. Can I put a question while you've been speaking to me as well? With regard to listed buildings, why not relax the rules with regard to listed buildings? I know you'll tell me it's got to go to government level, but when these listed buildings were built, if those builders had the opportunity to put solar on their roofs, they would have done it. They wouldn't have to be restricted with rules telling them you can't do it in our day and age. And I think you can put it on the rear of buildings, so I understand, but you are allowed that exception. But why not relax it? We're not going to solve climate change if we have all these silly rules around this building.
I'll take that one, Shai. There is no hard and fast rule with listed buildings, as you have noticed. That there's solar panels in Gloucester Cathedral everywhere. So every single listed building is different. I've got 3 applications on my desk at the moment which involve solar arrays, and all of them are going to get consent because the solar arrays in their particular positions are absolutely fine. We've got a legislative requirement which sometimes in a variety of things, not clashes, but sometimes causes a little bit of compromise to be required when it comes to climate change versus historic buildings, and solar panels are one of those times where we have to think of a compromise when we can. So more often than not, if an application comes into me, it'll probably be somewhere that it would be all right.
Are you Stroud?
Mm-hmm.
You represent Stroud, okay, so I know I spoke to Simon Pickering, and you probably know.
I don't think we want to get into the individual
No,
buildings.
I asked him about the positioning once it was sort of buildings on listed buildings. You said it's okay on the rear of the building. You're saying it can be anywhere on the building.
It depends which is the most visible roof slope. There's a whole load of variables involving that. So yes, hidden roof slopes, we've always said yes, but where there's a roof slope that might not be so visible, then equally yes. So no.
Kathy, I've had your hand up for a long time. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. You're sounding more hopeful to me, and obviously Wootton has an array of different areas. We're all in virtually all, I think, area of natural beauty. A lot of the town is conservation. Some of the buildings are listed in various degrees. Now, about 4 or 5 years ago, I applied to Stroud Council for an area that was within a conservation area but not listed. And I had a very discouraging reply that's, to the initial thing that said, we'll tell you whether we're likely to approve or not, and it came back as no, we're not likely to approve, but if you'd like to put in an historical assessment or something or other, we might possibly consider it. Has the view in Stroud altered enough for it to be worthwhile putting in a planning application in a conservation area, even if you're not listed?
I can't comment on individual cases. In conservation,
no, I know.
Yeah,
but conservation area.
In conservation areas now, the permitted development rights have been distinctly decreased, so you might not need planning permission at all.
So how does one find out if you need planning permission?
There is on our website. Then there is actually quite a good interactive guide by the central government's guide. So you may well find it there, but if not, then just ask us. Is the answer to that. It's under
maybe I might afterwards, because if you can tell us by postal code area or something like that, if that area requires planning permission,
conservation areas are
incredibly valuable.
Yeah, conservation areas, and I can't remember whether the permitted development rights changed about 5 years ago, I think, with regard to solar panels. So in certain circumstances, but the best thing to do is ask the planning department. You've probably not seen me.
Is there an email, or should I ask you?
planning@stroud.gov.uk.
Anybody else?
A very general question. Do you envisage planning regulation changing to make new builds obliged
Hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
But
Sorry.
No, I was going to say a lot of that forms part of the building regulations. So the building regulations manage the fabric of the building. They manage your energy use. The planning is much more about land use rather than individuals.
It's also about aesthetics, isn't it? And
yes, it is. Yeah.
Suitable approved materials.
Yeah.
So you could. Is it within the remit of planning law to say the roofing material should include?
Well, when we write a local plan, it has to go through the Secretary of State for examination. But I think in general, the whole of planning is moving to be more sustainable, as are building regulations, and all of these statutory processes are working together. So just because something might not need planning permission doesn't mean it doesn't need listed building consent, which is just something I wanted to cover from earlier. But in general, yeah, local plans are looking to adapt to the climate emergency. The council has got its own 2030 strategy team where it's trying to deliver carbon neutrality for the council as an organisation, and then trying to help its residents in reaching that. And there'll be lots of interventions that go into the built environment, and where those require planning, then the planning authority deal with it. But ultimately, we're here to try and deliver sustainable development. So the aim of the planning system is to fundamentally make sure that the world we live in, survives.
And technology has changed.
A quick follow-up from it. Kingswood has a neighbourhood plan, a neighbourhood planning statement. Is that, do you think, a vehicle for, say, what's the Northern District to say, this is the view of the communities that the built environment should include?
Yeah, if there's a strong local view, then a neighbourhood plan is the way to make that, is the way to formulate that. If it's not in a local plan, it's very difficult, or neighbourhood plan, it's not in a plan, the planning authority can't really do anything with it. So there needs to be a policy if you ever want to direct and control an element of the built environment.
Anyone else? Any more questions?
Can I just say one more thing? If you are thinking about doing solar, just be aware that if you're on any historic roofs, you may find that you need to have a look out for some bats or other protected species. So I'm just going to take this opportunity just to say that. It's not really my department, that's under habitat regs, but do be careful.
So there's a new local plan that's about to go through examination, which sets out a new policy, carbon neutral by 2030, which will mean all new developments have got to be carbon neutral. Do you think that will have a big impact if it's approved in terms of increasing solar on new developments? Could you just summarise that?
I should be very quick. I think there's many ways in which you can reduce carbon, and solar is one of them. I think possibly the best way to do it is take a bit of everything. But yes, the new policy will certainly help to reduce that, and we will probably see that delivering more solar. Often on new houses they do fabric first, and they might do heat pumps. When you are building new, they're much easier than when you're retrofitting.
You also need good insulation. If you insulate a house properly, you spend an awful lot less energy. So actually, we really need to target house builders to insulate properties properly.
Yeah. So that question was a point about good insulation, and I couldn't agree more. Most of that comes under the building regulations, but when we have a policy that comes out in the new local plan, it will be something that we can look at more in planning terms, and it comes down to fabric first. You build a building that the very essence of that building helps to minimise your energy usage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's going to give a bit more of a technical view. Don't ask if anybody wants to grab a quick drink while we're just having a changeover, then please do. But don't all rush for the bar. Okay, thank you so much.
Hello. Surprised to see so many people here. It's really quite impressive. I'm actually quite surprised to see myself here as well, because it was only a couple of hours ago that I was asked to come along. Just quickly explain who we are. So the West Country Electrical Services, we're based in Cam. I live in Charfield. We've got 8 people working on PV and associated works, and we come from the complete opposite spectrum. So very small, very local, and we are doing about 1 a week at the moment, all locally, mostly GL12, GL11, some over in the forest because Google seems to work on a as the crow flies, search. So if somebody flies you 5 miles away and you've got an hour and a half drive to go and do a quote, but never mind. I did PV sort of 15 years ago in the heady days of the old feed-in tariff. And like all government schemes, they can change just like that. So the bottom dropped out of the market then and we left it alone. And then over the last couple of years, things have sort of started to pick up. The war in Ukraine has been a little bit of a boost, but the main motivation I've found from people over the last few years have actually been electric vehicles, because the payback, which none of the standard calculations actually include it, but if you can run your car for nothing by charging it at home, the payback is just phenomenal. But there's no sort of standard formulas to work that out at the moment. So a lot of the motivation people have is they're looking at buying a car and they want to be able to drive it around for nothing. And then the other thing that's boosted it as well is the improvement in battery technology, because you make your energy during the daytime when you're out at work and you want to use it at night time. So what we're finding is we're getting inquiries which are mostly PV with battery rather than PV on its own, PV with battery and electric vehicle charging, and so on. So just, we're not salesmen, we're engineers. We've done it all ourselves, we install it ourselves. So one of the best ways I think to actually sell something is to actually own it yourself as well. So my average 4-bedroom house in Charfield, I've got solar thermal. Who spoke about solar thermal? I've got solar thermal on there, which is another discussion, but it's a fantastic technology. I've got solar PV, I've got a battery, which happens to be a Give Energy battery, but and electric vehicle and electric vehicle charger. And I'm very happy with all of it. And you're just mentioning something about generation in the winter time. So some of these lovely sunny days we've had, there was a Friday just before Christmas, it was a beautiful day. I've got a 3 kilowatt peak system. It was generating at 2 throughout that day. It filled my battery up and it didn't drain the battery until Sunday evening.
And you can charge your car.
And I can charge my car. So yeah, so there we go. Right, I'll answer some questions before you ask them if you like. Some of the things that we get asked, the classic first one is, how many panels can I get on my roof? And the answer to that is, depends what size they are. Literally, so back in the day, Mike said number of panels, it's about output per square metre, if you like. And last 10 years or so, that's improved dramatically. So we would say, how much generation would you get on your roof? Other things that people don't understand, which is quite understandable. What's the difference between a kilowatt and a kilowatt hour? I'm sure there's people here who just go, and there's a lot of people who will be able to answer that. What's so kilowatt hour is a fantastic one. A unit of electricity, what does that relate to in terms of a kilowatt and a kilowatt hour, and so on and so on and so on. So the only way really to satisfy people's curiosity and provide them with the right answer is to sit down and talk to the customer, which is why, again, we don't do the big schemes. We do get inquiries all over the country, which I never understand. Why somebody from Nottingham sends me an email on Boxing Day wanting to go and look at his little installation, but yeah. So we work very, very locally. So, technical questions.
Someone was asking about roof, if you can't
oh, right,
go on
yeah,
the
sorry.
south side, can you go on
Yeah.
the north side?
North side's not very good, but it does produce a little bit. Due south is perfect, and sort of 45 degrees either way of that. So, but you can face east and get the morning. You can face west and get the afternoon. You have people with one east-west facing houses, and some on either side, and you've got your generation across the course of the day. Yeah. So
it's not. Would you say it's not really worth installing on a north side?
I wouldn't particularly go I wouldn't like to go and sell that, shall we say that, because that's the right way to put it. You'll get something, but not south or west and east of south, yeah. So
I think you've more or less answered my question, except we had somebody come and look several years ago, and our main roof is east-west, and they said there's no point. Have things changed?
No, there's lots of point, because you'll get good morning sunshine and good evening sunshine.
Because there is quite a bit of thought as well about you don't just need sunshine, you just need the daylight and...
Yeah, it'll generate in the mist, but sunshine is
best.
Is by far the best, yeah. But also in the summertime, the sun's up there, so whether you're east facing, west facing, the sun is right up above you, so you'll have both sides working at it.
Even if you've got an ideally oriented roof, you could have other roof lines or trees that could shade the PV panels. Do you have to have a special controller or microinverters in order to manage that?
Yeah. So the easiest thing is to take the tree down. No, so yes, microinverters, which will switch off the shaded panels and power optimizers. So when a shade, so for properties with tall chimneys and things like that, so as the shade comes on, the shaded panel will switch off and get bypassed.
So is that a now standard system? Or
it's not standard, it's dependent on the application. So nice sunny roofs, you don't need to worry about it. If you've got complicated shadows coming across, then that's something we would do, yeah. You're the chair.
I've done things slightly backwards, because I bought myself an electric car last year. I then decided I'd have panels fitted, so I had panels fitted. And after I'd had those fitted, I then decided to have 10 kilowatt battery installation. All of those things work on their own brilliantly.
Yeah.
But I am not sure that I have the system optimised. Is that something your company could?
You can look at.
The companies that did the panels were from Hull, I think it was, and the battery was from Essex.
Yeah.
So they're reluctant to come out and.
Yeah.
I mean, they can interrogate the system online. So when I have a problem with the battery, they're able to come out and replace it.
I've heard about a team from Essex who's been around.
So
that's why.
I mean,
yeah, sure.
I mean, the equipment I think is all brilliant, but you've got to get it configured right. And when I looked at the app that comes with the Lux Power converter, there are so many different switches and configuration things, and they're all intertwined. So you might switch one of them, and it might change how the batteries charge, how the car, So I mean, I'd be interested to know if you've got a business card later on.
Business cards, because they're all green. It's quite funny. I get asked so many times for business cards, except in the middle of the right area of Bristol, where you have to have a business card, digital business card, because don't produce paper. But yeah, no, that's fine. But there was somebody.
Right, so my question is not about electricity, my question is about the structural integrity of the roof.
Okay.
So my house is 200 years old, my roof is 200 years old. So my interest is if I put how do I get confident, or what do you do to give me confidence that my roof is strong enough to take the
Okay. Where there's sort of questions about a roof, and a lot of sort of modern houses it's given, then we can do a survey, so we'll have somebody who does a structural survey from the data we take, so yes. And you come back with an answer, roof is strong enough, or no, it needs strengthening. So
that's part of the assessment.
If you have an installation of panels but no battery, and you have an electric car, can you use the battery from the car as a backup?
At the moment, no. It's coming, yeah. At the moment, no, but that's sort of the next nice big step is to get everybody storing surplus electricity in their car and then sending it back in again. So.
Next question, Andrea.
I've just a bit of a basic question. I live in a row terrace. Are there any considerations
I mean, it's always occurred to me, are there opportunities living in a terrace in terms of the roof space? But my own roof space is quite small. But are there any considerations
to gather up with your neighbours?
Well, yeah, but I suspect
It would be lovely if you could do the whole road.
I don't know if people will sign up.
Sort of more for a big.
Are there any benefits to doing that, or is it all?
Well, you gather, you'd save a little bit of space, so you can.
Another question, please. Lady there.
Hi, have you ever done any installations on like off-grid projects? So where you're not putting the money back into the grid if you've got excess?
I've worked on off-grid, we haven't installed them. But you can go off-grid, so my system at home, which because it's fun more than anything else, we can go off-grid, so I can switch the grid off and use my battery until it runs out, on a Sunday. So yeah.
So would your company install it on things that aren't houses? So there's a lot of people doing this tiny house movement who have these solar panels. Is that something you would do?
So on ground frames.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And is it difficult to learn how to install your own
To
solar?
learn?
Yeah.
Ooh, it's terrible.
YouTube it.
There's a lot of things you can YouTube, but making a meringue is one of them I still can't do. But
Maybe we've got time for a couple more questions.
Is every system capable of going off-grid? Like if there's a power cut, will it still, it's got a battery, will that
no,
still
you need a battery, and either need the right battery or the right piece of kit in front of the battery. So
if you have a power cut.
yeah, but
so you get a lot of
yeah. I say, mine, you can go and switch the power off, and then Punk comes in, which is a nice party game.
Is that an expensive kit?
Not especially, no. There are batteries which have it built in. We install a Tesla battery, which does it. The only reason, well, I say when we install them when we get them. So about 2 years waiting time on those. So yeah, but that's it's a smart piece of kit that can do it. Otherwise, the sort of give energy ones, we put a piece of equipment in front of it, which just detects if we're going.
Just a thought, with the increasing availability of electric vehicles, there must be quite a lot of electric vehicle batteries around. Is there any thought that you can use batteries for the Nissan Leaf sector as part of the electric?
They're not very big.
One more question, and then we can
most batteries are lithium-ion. I just wondered what your take on things like thermal batteries are, or are they just a load of hot air, so to speak?
What was the question? You repeat the question?
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
So, most batteries are lithium-ion. What's our take on thermal batteries? So there's other things around, but box standard lithium-ion. Not got into any of the rest of it yet. So.
Okay.
Anyone else? So one last thing. So there's a couple of little rules of thumb if you're sort of thinking. So an average sort of 3-4 bedroom house might use about 3,000 or 4,000 units, kilowatt hours a year plus. Okay. Someone mentioned about the 3.6 kilowatt thing. So you might get 3 to 4 kilowatts on that house, and it might produce 3,000 to 4,000 kilowatt hours per year. So it's a kind of very, very basic rule of thumb. So 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, etc. And if you're into carbon calculations, we've just done a quote for someone yesterday. So the 5 kilowatt peak system producing about 5,000 kilowatt hours a year, not all being used by themselves because some of it goes back into the grid in the daytime, and that's saving about a tonne of carbon